Good morning, everybody. In this video I want to talk to you about Eliza. There's been a lot of Eliza content on my channel over the last month. I made the initial guide on her around the beginning of January. I found out some interesting things about the character that made me want to try her out online, and I ended up having some of the most fun experiences I've had ever playing ranked in Tekken 7. So at this point I'm actually officially going forward with Eliza as my main character in this game. Even though there is a lot of stuff I still have to learn about her, I'm really enjoying this more than any other character, and so I'm going to take my own advice and play what I like. For those of you who have been keeping up with the Eliza content, what this video is going to be is, well, I'm pretty happy with the initial guide I made on the character. I think it's one of the better ones I've made. There were so many things that we had to leave out simply because I didn't have time to discuss them, or I didn't really know about them yet. So in this video I want to go into practice mode here in a little bit, and I want to show you the bits and pieces that we haven't talked about yet, and I also want to share some of my experiences learning this character over the last month. I'm playing her at a pretty high rank right now. It's not crazy high, but I got Overlord the other day, so I'm sort of nibbling at the underscript of Gembu right now. So it's a pretty decent rank, and I think you need to play at sort of, a level where it starts to become really difficult when you want to try out what actually works with the character. You want to be in an environment against, other players who can really react to and deal with all the stuff in your offense that is not going to work, and so you have to find these solid, reliable options that are going to work at any level, and so that's what I've been thinking a lot about with Eliza lately. I think that's going to be it in terms of an introduction here, and we're going to jump over to practice mode right now. So the last thing I'm going to say is that if you haven't watched my initial guide on Eliza, or if you've never used her before, this isn't really for you. I'm not going to explain a lot of basic concepts in this video. I'm going to assume that you already have some basic knowledge about the game and the character, and this is going to be more about specific setups and other stuff like that. So check that out first if you haven't already. In any other case, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a couple of seconds.
Alright, welcome to church, guys. There are three main things I want to talk about with Eliza that we haven't touched upon yet, and they are, I could mention her FADC, her super, which looks like that, the bloody horn, and jump-ins. We haven't talked about these three things yet, so we're gonna do that in this video. But first, I want to give you sort of my view of Eliza after a month of using her, in terms of what is her playstyle, what is her strategy, how do you want to use her if you're a Tekken player, you're playing against other good Tekken players, and you can't rely on gimmicks or ignorance on the part of your opponent. You sort of have to develop a real sort of solid playstyle with her. What does she play like? And I'm going to give you my view on that. So there's going to be a lot less hand-holding in this video compared to my other tutorials. I'm going to speak faster. I'm not going to explain notations and stuff, because I'm assuming that you're already somewhat knowledgeable with the character and with the game in general. So I hope that's okay, but this is a little bit more for the people with a bit more experience, let's say. So in my initial guide I talked a lot about optimal range with Eliza, and I'm gonna start there with the character, because I said that I think that out here she's very powerful because she has a lot of tools she can use that her opponent can't really do anything about, because they can't fight at this range. And the main thing obviously is that she has a usable projectile in the shape of her fireball too. That's really good, but another really important move for her from out here, really one of her most important move overall, is her Moonlight 3-4. This move is absolutely amazing and very, very important for the character. Now, the usefulness of this move is going to depend on the range that you're playing at with this character, because it will reach from this range if you do it out of Moonlight, which is good, but then it becomes very reactable because you're spaced out, and so your opponent can react to and duck this because they can see the Moonglide. And so it goes from being a safe launcher to being a mix-up situation. So you gotta mix this up, and the mix-up obviously is you've got Moonlight 2 for the mid, which is good. It's a safe move which saves the entire stance. If you didn't have this safe chunky mid here, the stance would be a lot worse, but the mid is extremely solid, and so the mix-up is solid. And you also have the low, which is very punishable, but it's fast enough and good enough and has enough range that you can get away with it. So yeah, the mix-up is very solid and it works from out here. Now, the reason this becomes even more powerful is that you have to use this stance in tandem with your fireball, because alright, if I was just out here and my opponent didn't have anything to fear, they could just sort of sit and crouch and wait and then maybe try and react to Moonlight 2. it would be a lot less powerful. But because you can harass them with fireballs, what that's going to do most of the time is it's going to force your opponent to sidewalk, because they want to sidewalk these fireballs. It's scary to just stand and block the fireballs because she has the FADC, which we can talk more about later. But most of the time, the most optimal way of dealing with fireball spam in this game is you start sidewalking, and then you try and close a little bit of distance, and then you start sidewalking again, looking for the next fireball, right? So the reason this is important is that Moonlight 3-4 is a homing move, and so it becomes very powerful when your opponent is sidewalking. So I think an important way to use this is you're trying to cause your opponent to sidewalk with your fireball too, and when you've accomplished that, instead of throwing the next fireball, maybe you do a Moonlight 3-4 and you try and catch the sidewalk, and now you've launched your opponent. So that's very powerful. But like I said, there are risks involved with it, because your opponent can react to the Moonglide, they can duck the 3-4, they can duck and launch the low option. And so against good players, you have to mix in the mid to keep them honest, otherwise it's going to be very easy for them. But there is a more optimal way of applying this move, and this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult. I'm going to move into about this range right here, and this is really the optimal range for the character in my opinion. And the reason for that is if you're doing 4-4-3-4, which looks like that and doesn't come out of Moonglide, so you're doing the move naked, so to speak, it's not coming out of any stance. It's fast enough that your opponent can never react to this. And so if you're in this position right here where your opponent is still liable to sidewalk, they're still sort of scared of the fireballs, and they still don't have a lot of options that can reach you, you can surprise them with this move. If you interrupt something, if you catch a sidewalk or a sidestep, you're going to get the launch, and so it's essentially a safe launcher from this range. But it's difficult to maintain this range because your opponent has stuff they can come in at you with at this range. They can jab at you and try and swat you out of the air. So it's dangerous, but it makes the 4-4-3-4 option so very powerful that you feel very good at this range as well. And you should try and exist around here, in my opinion. Another good reason for that is that your FADC after the fireball into 3-4 can actually natural combo, like you saw right there. Making it a very powerful launch, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, if you're at this sort of range, like I was talking about this range right here before, if you just go a little bit closer, like you take a step in and you exist right here, this is actually Eliza's worst range in my opinion. She doesn't do great here. When she's very far spaced out, you know, she's way out here, she's fine. When she's a little bit closer, she's very dangerous. And when she's super close up, she does alright. But when she's at range sort of 1 around here, I don't think she's very good, because there are a lot of characters that can reach her with powerful stuff here. I mean, just think about a down 4-2 from Jack and stuff. But she doesn't really have anything. Her down 4 is barely going to reach, and that's her most dangerous move from this range. But you can see, just take a tiny step back and it becomes a whiff. So that's dangerous. And then everything else is sort of a little bit too short or a little bit too slow. So I'm thinking like you want to stay at about range 2 or even further out, or you want to stay at a close range and try and keep up with your opponent here. But at this sort of mid-range right here, it's kind of risky and you don't really have all that much you can hit with. Back 1 works a lot of the time, but yeah, you got to be careful. And so in terms of close-up game, if we're going to continue talking about range, Eliza doesn't have optimal poking game, but she has enough that she can keep up with your opponent as long as you know what you're doing. Her down forward one is very solid. It's going to do its job very nicely, but it doesn't have the frame data to allow you to use it to do like elaborate setups. Like you don't want to like set up counter hits with this, kind of like you would with maybe Miguel or Katarina kind of thing, or maybe, you know, Kazumi. It doesn't quite have that frame data. It's just a very solid mid poke. It has the mix up obviously with the down forward 1-4, which is the safe high, and then the punishable damage mid with the 2. So that works, even though it's not amazing. You have a fish hook, which is always great because, you know, when you need that fast mid, it's very important. It's a round ender. And then that's basically it outside of your jabs. So what you're trying to do when you're at this range is you can keep up with your opponent in the short term, but if you're playing against Nina, Law, Katarina, these characters who love to be up here and can just keep on attacking, you're gonna they're sort of gonna outrun you in the long term, and so you're gonna try and get out for the most part. And you have a couple of very powerful ways of doing that. that I want to talk about now. One thing you can do is that you can use your great poking tools to set up the down 4. The down 4 is very powerful. It is just fast enough that it's an extremely useful low, and it's honestly one of like the best counter hit lows in the game. It's going to lead to a solid combo when you get the counter hit, so it's very, very good. And if you don't, you just collect the damage. You can stay down here and try and apply a full crouch mix-up if you want to, even though you're not super powerful when it comes to that. You can do, you know, another down 4. You can do cool mids like while standing 2 for the knockdown or whatever. But the other main thing, the most important thing in my opinion that you're trying to do at this range is you're trying to get a clean hit down 3. Because if you can clean hit down 3, you can cancel into specials. And the most important thing that you're trying to do when you're canceling specials is this. Down 3 into DP2. Let's see if we can get it out a couple of times here nice and clean, okay? There it is. So I've actually been criticized on my gameplay videos that I don't use enough DPs with Eliza, and that's a very good point. This down 3 into DP2, I haven't used it enough because I play in bed with a control pad when I play online most of the time. I'm not using a stick, and I've never been a Street Fighter player, so cancelling into DPs is not something that exists in my muscle memory, and so I've had to start working it in there. And I've sort of developed a technique for moving my thumb right now where I can get this out very consistently. Maybe I'll show that in a video if it's something that other people are struggling with, but you know, most people who play this game have experience from 2D fighting games, and so doing stuff like quarter circles, doing stuff like, you know, DPs comes very naturally to them. So that's actually a part of my gameplay where I've had to keep up with her. But I'm just going to say here that I think that cancelling this down 3 into DP2 is actually such a powerful option that it makes you scary in the close-up game. You need the clean hit to make it work, but you can get the clean hit pretty easy. You can see even at this range right there, I'm going to get the clean hit. So, you know, you're poking up close, you're trying to get that clean hit with the down 3, and when you do, you can do a special. You can do the fireball, you can do the DP. And it's very, very good. The DP2 is what you're going to get naturally. You can look for some sort of whiff or try and get out with the dive kicks, which is very good as well. It's going to whiff like you see here if you do the 4, unless they do a move, but you can interrupt them if they do a move. If they block and you hit very low, which you're going to do here, if you get the block, you're at good plus frames, so you can do a mix-up. And then if you want to do the dive kick 3, she's going to dip back, you know, a lot, maybe create a whiff, and then you're going to get a powerful knockdown. And you can get guaranteed damage off of dive kick 3 unless they recover properly. They need to hold back, otherwise you can get damage right there. So that's cool. So yeah, down 3 is like your most important close-up tool, and I think now that I'm just about to hit Gembu with the character, implementing this into my sort of close-up game with Eliza, I think is going to be the sort of deciding factor as to whether or not I'm successful with that, because I feel like I struggle up in the close-up game a little bit with her at this moment. So just to recap what we've been talking about, I think Eliza is a great character from a spaced up position. If you can exist at just the tip range of her 4-4-3-4, that's optimal, but it's difficult to do, especially if your opponent is moving around a lot. At the sort of 2 range right here, she's a little bit problematic, and then when you're up here, you can keep up in the short run, but what you're trying to do most of the time is get some sort of special cancel or counter hit, maybe with this move, by the way, to get out of that situation, because that's better for you. Next thing I'm going to talk about is this string, because I really underestimated this string when I made the initial guide on the character. I'm just going to mention that it is very good, and it should be used at all levels of play, but you should stop using it if your opponent, it turns out your opponent is good at sidewalking the 3rd hit. If that happens, then you're mainly going to use this to fish for counter hits, which you can do. And this is a natural launch on counter hit, by the way. You always get the combo on counter hit, which is great because you can see the move actually has some pretty good properties in terms of high crush and range. So you can get counter hits with this, and it's very good. But the main mix-up is, are you going to finish the string or are you not going to finish the string? So if you do the first hit, you can get the launch. If you finish the string, you don't get the launch, but you come down with this powerful mid. If your opponent does a move, they can trade with this. What they have usually for trading is just jabs. and this is going to trade very favorably with jabs. This does a lot more damage than a single jab. You can see it does 23 damage on a naked hit right there. So if they do a jab, you're going to get a massive chunk of damage and a knockdown, and you're just going to eat a jab and fall down on the ground. So it's actually a move that you can use to trade very favorably, and it's super good for that. And you can fish for counter hits. You can also fish for sidewalks with this move, which is something that we haven't talked about. And the reason this works is the second hit of this move is actually going to track and follow your opponent around. It's very cool. It's kind of like how down 4-2-1 used to work with Lars back in Tekken 6, where that move was extremely good. You could sort of do down back 2-1 with Lars, and the second hit would follow your opponent around, so it became a very good harassment mid. And this works in kind of the same way. If they start sidewalking, the first hit whiffs, the second hit is going to scoop them up for the launch, so that's very good. But yeah, use this string, just be very careful that if you're playing somebody seriously good and they react fast enough, if you finish the string with the third hit, they can sidewalk that hit and they can launch it, which is difficult to do, but it is possible and it does happen. And then you need to sort of reevaluate how you're applying the string, because it becomes a lot more dangerous. The next thing I want to talk about before we jump into stuff like her super is I want to talk about back 3-4, which is a move that I overlooked in my initial tutorial. There are two moves I need to mention that I didn't talk about in that tutorial. The first one is running 1. I can just mention that you have a running 1, and it's very decent because it's got good tracking properties. So it's another way to get in on people who are sidewalking. It does 30 damage, which is surprisingly big. The move doesn't look very chunky. But it's very powerful. It's got good tracking, but it is a duckable high. It's obviously nowhere in the region of like running 2 from Claudio or something like that, but it's decent, and you can use it and you should use it. It's also a spin move, so it's alright. But the back 3-4 is more important in my opinion, and the reason this move is so important is I think it's one of your best wall splatting options, and you can also use it for wall carry. Now the string is natural, it's a high mid for 34 damage and a knockdown, which is massive. So that's very, very good. Your opponent is going to punish it if they block the second hit, so what you can do is you can actually try and hit confirm, because the string is delayable, like you can see right here. So right now I'm actually hit confirming and finishing, and you can see I still get the natural combo. If you do the maximum amount of delay, kind of like that, you can see that the string becomes non-natural, but that is still a very useful thing because it's going to allow you to catch people when fishing for the wall splat. So you can be at this range, you do the back 3, your opponent thinks that you're done attacking and they press a button, and you get the wall splat with the 4 follow-up. And then you can go into a nice wall combo, right? So that's very, very good, especially if you delay it. It becomes, you know, you've used strings like this before. If you've been playing Tekken, you know you can delay some strings to cause wall splats, and it's powerful. So that's very, very good. But another thing I want to show you is that in a lot of my videos on Eliza, you'll see me do awkward wall conversions, because I don't know, like I'll do stuff like this and then I waste so much damage because I don't have optimal options for wall carry with her. That's another problem caused by the fact that I don't do enough DP2, which is good for wall carry. But back 3-4 actually does wonders when you're trying to wall carry with the character. So say for example that I were to launch at this range and I spin early, like maybe I do something like this. You can see that back 3-4 is going to cause a very nice wall splat. And I can even do it further out to show you the great range of the move. Let's do something like maybe this. Okay, that didn't quite work, but you can see the properties of the move. It sends them into this very nice kind of arc that is going to cause a nice high wall splat, allowing you for good wall combos. So it's very good for that. It actually hits very nicely after a float jab as well. So say for example I did 4-4-3-4 here, I go in like that, I float jab, and then I can actually use that, and you can see the wall spot right there was perfect. So if I get 4-4-3-4 at this range, I can go in with a Moonlight 1, I can float jab with another one. I can do back 3, 4, and then I can go and I can get a wall combo. Now I'm finally getting good damage right there, so it's very good for that as well. It's a great move, and we should have talked about it in the initial tutorial, because well, I didn't know basically. So I think that's going to conclude the bits and pieces I wanted to talk about with the character, and now I want to go in and talk about those 3 things that I mentioned in the beginning: her jump-ins, her super, and her FADC. I'm going to make a quick cut here, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I think what we're going to start off with when it comes to Eliza is her jump-ins. We haven't talked about them yet, and it's another thing where, you know, I wasn't really comfortable with like jump-in stuff because I'm not a Street Fighter player. I actually, one of the reasons I don't enjoy watching Street Fighter is I feel, you know, 90% of the time there's a lot of jumping around like you're on the moon in zero gravity and just, you know, throwing blueberries at one another, and there's not that much actual fighting in the fighting game from my perspective as a very ignorant Street Fighter watcher, obviously. But her jump-ins are good and should be used when you know how to use them. She has a couple of options. She can do like jump in 1, she can do jump in 2, she can do 4, and these moves actually become launchers if you hit close to the ground. So similar to how you want to hit your dive kick 4 and get it blocked, or hit as close to the ground as possible to get as many plus frames as possible, you want to try and hit with your jump-in moves as close to the ground as possible, because if you do, they actually become normal hit launchers, kind of like that right there. So the option that I'm going to recommend if you're going to try and jump in at your opponent and go over something or interrupt them is actually jump in 2. It's my favorite move for doing this, and the reason for that is that you can natural combo straight into 2-2, and you see that's completely natural, and then 2-2 will actually allow you to, you know, it cancels into specials, right? So you can create like a 63 damage combo. That's full combo damage right there by connecting with this move. And it becomes kind of a little bit more intuitive to use because it's like jump in 2, 2, 2. So you're just pressing 2 3 times, and you can get this into a nice special cancel, which becomes very powerful. And you can EX it for even more damage, and you get a very nice chunk. So it's powerful. You need to hit confirm it, but you can do this, and it becomes a full huge combo if you do it. Obviously, she can do her special cancels, her dive kicks out of jumps as well. So you can do, you know, you see a lot of really good Eliza players, like Chanel. They do these short hop dive kick 4s to fish for plus frames and start offense. That's not super easy to do when you're new to the character, but it's something that's going to be important if you want to be advanced. So gotta check that out. But even more importantly, if you're jumping backwards and you have enough time here to look for like a whiff, you can look for that whiff, and then you can dive kick in and whiff punish from a safe position up in the air here when you're jumping backwards. So that's very powerful. You can obviously do your EX version for a massive, let's see if we can get it here, like that, for a massive whiff punish, and then you get a full combo. So that's very powerful as well. But when you're jumping in specifically, I think 2 is your best option. And another thing that you can do here when you're jumping in with D2 is you can actually get a back 4 for the guaranteed follow-up if you're fast enough. And it's not hard to do. This is probably your most powerful option. If you played Eliza or Eliza, you know why, because this back 4 allows her to cancel into any special she wants, completely natural. This is 15 frames, and the developers apparently think that at 15 frames it's basically at, you know, frame data of a normal hit launcher, so you get to cancel into any special you want to and get it natural for free. The reason this is important is that DP1, like I did right there, is a normal hit launcher, and so if you can do this cancel, you can get massive combos, and it's very, very powerful. So I think your best option after a low hit jump in, you can do the same thing off of the 4 obviously, but I like the 2, is you can do a back 4 and then you can cancel into any of your specials, you can EX them, but you're going to get that DP1 normal hit launcher allowing you for a massive launch. So that's going to be very, very powerful. And if I had done the proper wall combo there, that would probably have allowed me something like 90 plus damage. I haven't tried it out, but let's see if we can get it again here. Yeah, and I even messed up and did a down one for the cancel. I think that would be something like 93 or something. So it's very powerful, very, very good, and something that you should keep in mind if you're working on your jump-ins, and if you're like a Street Fighter player and you're already comfortable with the concept of jumping at opponents, it's going to be very, very good. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is your super, the Bloody Horn. This is like a normal, like it's a Shinku Hadouken input. 2 quarter circle forwards, 1+2 for the input. There it is. And then you can do your while running 1, which we mentioned briefly, for your spin move, and then you get a combo. This is going to cost both of your bars, which is why I think most people don't use the move all that much at all. I've seen high level Eliza players use it extremely sparingly. Chanel throws it out rarely. I've seen it once or twice, because I think if you have a blood bar, you can actually use that for EX dive kick, which I think is your best way of using your bars, because it's such a massive crush move. It's going to give you a full combo. It's just godly how good this move is, because it crushes so many things. It beats out people who are in the air. It's going to hit people who are on the ground. It's going to hit them in the middle of moves. It's going to crush all lows, all mids, some highs. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And you have a couple of other good options for spending your meter as well. I mean, you can do invincible DPs when you need to get out of a pressure situation. You can FADC off of a fireball. So I think spending all of your bar just to get this one massive launch with the Bloody Horn is not all that useful. But if you want to do it, if you can hit confirm something and cancel into it, the damage is going to be massive. So this is another situation where I actually think that the 2-2 is like a very good option to cancel into this. Let's see if we can get it out here. It's not something that I've practiced, which I probably should have done, but there we go. And you can see that's 60 damage off of the launch initially, and that's also going to be somewhere between like 90 and 100 damage if you convert that to the wall. So it's obviously very, very good. If you are going to use it, I think cancelling into it after 2-2, which is natural, is a very good idea. And you can obviously do that after a jump in into 2-2, so that's 39 plus the Bloody Horn plus a full combo on top of that. It's going to be absolutely massive when you can get it, but I just happen to think that there are more powerful ways of using your bar, because if you use it on something else, you can do it twice, which is so good. And I should talk a little bit about the EX dive kick before we move on, because I think it's your best way of spending bar. I think it's like one of the best moves in the game, bar very few. I think it's absolutely massive. And so the reason this is so good, like I said, you have the crush properties and everything, but the way I use this move, and I think the optimal way of using this move, is you will do something like a safe move and let it get blocked, kind of like how you would set up a counter hit move or a crush move, like, you know, would be a good example, you know, maybe a down forward like this, or maybe, you know, some sort of crush launch or like a lightning screw. What you would do is you would allow your opponent to block a mid poke that is not 2-, maybe some jabs or something like a 1-2, and then you jump out with the EX dive kick. If they jab, trying to start their offense and take their turn, you're going to crush that and you're going to go over this. Another thing that is very, very common when you this is something that you see all the time in mid to sort of slightly highish ranks, is if I go in with a move that my opponent knows is safe. So say for example that I do 4-4-3-4 is a good example. This is a safe move, right? So if my opponent blocks this, they know I'm safe, so they know they can't punish, but they still want to take their turn and get damage, and so they are extremely likely to go for a low here. It's so common to either tack on a low poke or do something slightly bigger, like maybe if it's a Kuma, a down 4, to try and go for the knockdown. That has good range as well. So sweeps and stuff become extremely common in this situation. And that is why doing something like that into dive kicks, and especially EX dive kick, becomes so good, because you're going to crush that low for a full launch, and it's just amazing. And so working out when you want to set up the EX dive kick, you know, with letting something get blocked and then opt out, or getting a read on a low and then opting out with it, or using at the start of the round is going to be massive for you, and then you can use the wall carry to go to the wall, and then when you're at the wall, you're using, you know, stuff like dive kick harassment to close the round out. You can try and get wall splats with stuff like dive kick 3, which is obviously very good. You can use the back 3-4 that I talked about earlier. You have your power crush move, which is going to wall splat and be homing, which is great. The down 4 is great at the wall as well, and then you have that amazing wall combo that I did right there for good damage as well. So really, really important stuff overall. Okay, the last thing we should talk about is your FADC. There are a couple of ways to apply it, but her FADC, basically you do a fireball and then you do quarter circle forward 3+4, and she goes into an EX version of her Moonglide, and then you have access to all of your moves out of Moonglide. So I can EX this into the low like I did right there. I don't have to do the 3-4. Now the reason this is important, a lot of the time what you see people do with Eliza, which I think is maybe a little bit of a waste, is that they'll like do a combo with her. Say I like spin my opponent like this, and then you can EX into you can FADC, I should say, into Moonglide 3-4, and you can extend combos. That works in the middle of the combo because of the fact that it's a homing move. Sorry, not a homing move, a spin move. So you can use it as a high damage spin move in the middle of the combo, but you can also use it to artificially extend combos at the end to tack on a little bit more damage. So where your standard combo is going to do something like 60 to 62 damage with Eliza, if you FADC that at the very end and you max delay the Moonglide 3-4, which I can't do on the stage because it's not enough, there's not enough room, you can get something like maybe 67 to 69 damage, which is decent enough if you're looking to close out the round. But I think the more important way to use FADC is actually when you're playing keep out with fireballs from a range. So the reason that is important, you can see right there, what I did is if I do that fireball and I FADC into Moonglide 3-4, that'll actually become a natural combo for massive damage, which is very, very good. But if I'm locking my opponent down with fireballs and they're gonna block them or sidewalk them, I can FADC. It's gonna happen fast enough that my opponent, you know, gets a little bit surprised, and then you're able to apply a Moonglide mix-up. Or if they're fast enough, it has to become a mix-up. If they're not fast enough, you can just do whatever move you want and hope you catch them. But you can do the low, you can do the mid, and you can do the 3-4. Depending on what they're doing, it's all important. But it's another reason I think she's good at this sort of max range, but not quite, sort of range 2.5, because that's where fireball into Moonglide 3-4 out of an FADC is going to become a natural combo. And as you can see, that's 3 hits for 46 damage, so it's actually a massive combo. You're going to get really good damage, and so that's the way I would recommend that you utilize her FADC. She can also do it off of this thing, which is a sort of obscure string for Eliza. I haven't found that many important uses for this string yet. Maybe I'm going to try and think about that later, but this is 4-4, 4-2, and then you can do either of your fireballs, fireball 1 or 2, out of this, and you can also FADC that if you want to, but I don't think the move is great. The initial hit right there, the 4, doesn't have great range. You can't use it in combos really, unless you delay it. It's kind of hard, so I don't know. Maybe that move is good, maybe I don't know, but I haven't seen a lot of people use it, and I don't use it, so maybe we'll talk about that in a future video. Is that it? Is that what I wanted to talk about? I'm probably missing some stuff. After a dive kick 4, what do you want to go for in terms of setups and mix-ups? Because this is, you know, a pressure tool. I can talk a little bit about that before we close this up, because dive kick 4 is really important. This is how you harass people with pressure with the character. You can cancel from jabs, you can cancel from down 1, you can cancel from down 3, so you can like chain these things together, you know, like jab, dive kick, down jab, dive kick, down 3, dive kick, and you can keep going. And if your opponent doesn't know what to do about that, it's going to be very stressful for them. And then when you get the dive kick, you know, on hit or block, you can usually go for a nice mix-up. You see me go for the throw a lot, because if I get a low hit, that throw becomes combo-ish. You can see right there that actually comboed, meaning that the opponent basically has to break the throw. You can see right here, that's going to be like a massive combo. You can do this as well, obviously, after jumping. See if we can get it. Yeah, and it's going to be like 90 something damage. Yeah, so if they don't break that throw, that's going to be massive. They can break it, obviously, but you shouldn't always go for this throw, because people are going to start dealing with it properly when you're playing in higher ranks. So what Chanel tends to do a lot is he does a fish hook here for just a fast mid for his mix-up, or he tends to go into down 4, which is good as well, because if they try and jab out, you can counter hit that. You've got the crush properties, you know, you can go under any high that they do. So you got a couple of good options. You can, you know, down 3 clean hit into a special cancel. You have a lot of options, but yeah, use dive kick 4 into all kinds of attacks. It's good. Okay, I think that's going to be it. That was a lot of talking. I hope it was useful, guys. I hope you're playing Eliza. I want her to be as popular as possible, because I want this character to exist in Tekken going forward. She's my favorite character in the game right now, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that there are so many new and interesting things I have to learn about the character, you know. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope it was enjoyable. I'll see you guys again in the next video. Thank you, and bye-bye.